podcast comes to you with thanks to our friends at Trafalgar Square Finance, leading independent specialists in mortgages and all types of property finance. Whether it's buy-to-let, development or bridging finance, Trafalgar Square can help you organise your funding for your next property project. Exclusively to listeners of Your Property Podcast, Trafalgar Square offer a free one-to-one consultation. So whether you are a portfolio landlord looking to raise funds on your existing portfolio, or if you're just starting out and want to find out if you are eligible for a buy-to-let mortgage, Trafalgar Square Finance can help. It's easy to book with one of their experienced consultants by simply visiting yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/finance. You can find this link in the show notes for more details. Hello and welcome to Your Property Podcast. My name is Michelle Cairns and with us we've got Julian Maurice. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Michelle. Looking very glam today.
Thank you. Well, for people who are just listening to the audio, you can also check us out on YouTube as well to see how glam I look. Thanks, Julian. Julian, we spoke recently and you were telling me the story about why you got into design as a property investor and why you kind of made that shift, which was a story I hadn't actually heard before. So why don't we just start there for people who don't know you? Why did you get into design?
Okay, well, there was two things, because I was talking about why I actually got into investing and why I think design was important. But the reason why I got into design goes back further than that, from when I started doing property sourcing. So I had worked in a estate agency. I'd also worked as in lettings management, and I started doing sourcing probably, what was it, about 2002. So this was when the property market was going nuts and everyone was buying buy-to-let properties and people were able to get 125% mortgages and so on and so forth. So what was happening was in Leeds, lots of people were buying up cheap terraced houses. And so there was a lot of competition. So if you can picture it, now there's a lot of demand for rental properties and there's a lack of rental properties. In those days, there were so many people buying buy-to-let properties that there was a glut of rental properties. There was a lot of new build flats being built. And so one of my big concerns when I was sourcing these properties was not that it was difficult to find properties, but it was difficult to, once they were refurbished, to get them rented out because there was so much competition. Imagine if you've gone and asked somebody to trust you to spend their life savings on a property and it doesn't rent out. So being that I'd been an estate agent, letting agent, I'd learned very early on that if you've got a well-designed property, it looks good, it'll rent faster, it'll sell faster. So I always, when I did a refurb, I did a little bit more effort on the design. And as a result, these properties always broke the rental ceiling in the area and found tenants really fast. Now, I wasn't renting these properties out, I was passing them to letting agents. But because I did a good job on the design, these letting agents started passing clients to me that had bought properties. So I was getting more and more refurbs to do. So my business actually built up on the fact that I was just doing a little bit better. I was a little bit better on design than everybody else. And it built a reputation. Then moving forward to my own investing, this goes to 2010 when the property market took a dive. Fortunately, because I had this kind of reputation, it just seemed to come out the blue at the perfect time. I got a huge contract from an asset management company to furnish a big block of flats. So I made a really good profit from that. And then I had this money to invest myself. It wasn't easy going through this property market crash. It was very stressful. I had gone from having lots of clients to suddenly having none. Then I got this big project. I had some money in the bank and I thought, okay, I'll invest in property. And at the time, again, I don't know if you can remember this, but if you would have walked into a property investor network meeting, which I'd started doing, this was what was happening. You'd walk into the room and the guy at the front of the room was going, hands up, who wants to invest in property this year? Everybody in the room's putting their hands up. Then hands up, how many people want to invest in HMOs? Everybody in the room was putting their hand up. HMOs was the big thing, just like serviced accommodation is a big thing now. And just as the fact that, I've been in business, you look around a room full of investors and everybody's going, we're going to invest in that product. And I'm going to also invest in that product. And I'd had the same situation back when I was sourcing. I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to invest in property, I've got this money. This was about 2013. I've got this money to invest, but I'm going to have a ton of competition moving forward. So I just knew that I could design my way out of that problem. So I just upped my game on design, designed a really good HMO model, which I posted online. I've made a good career out of helping people do the same thing, but design has always got me out of trouble. Property is one thing, but it's always got in the property business, design has always got me out of trouble.
What does that mean, got you out of trouble?
Well, there's competition. So, when I was, like I say, we can run parallels now to the serviced accommodation sector, but imagine if everyone around you is investing in the same product. How do you make good money if that's happening? The only way to do it is to create a better product than everybody else, or create a cheaper product than everybody else. Now, with property, we're all looking for ROI. We're all looking to maximize our investment. And when it's your own money, in my case, it was my money, I don't want to have bad customers. I want to achieve a good rent. And so I knew that if I was going to have a lot of competition moving forward, I had to think forward 5-10 years and think, okay, well, if in 5 years' time, rather than having 5 competitors, I'm going to have 40 competitors, my product needs to be really good in 5 years' time. I have to design a great product. So all I can tell you is that in 10 years down the line now, 10 years down the line, when a lot of people say, oh, don't put in nice stuff, don't do it well because your tenants are only going to trash it, I did the opposite of what everyone was saying, did a nice job, really thought about the design. 10 years later, and I've still got a couple of my original tenants. I've got tenants that have been with me 10 years. If you walked into any of my houses, they're clean, tidy. A couple of them still look like show homes.
And they're HMOs.
Yeah, they're HMOs. So all of the problems that people seem to associate with HMOs, I've used design to avoid those issues.
Okay, so in terms of avoiding issues, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. A lot of people, when they think of design, interior design, they think of nice colours and nice cushions, right? They don't think about it certainly at the beginning of the project, and they don't think about the longevity of the project with its buy to hold, how long they want to keep the property for, how long they want the customers, tenants to stay for. How do you bring design into that aspect at the beginning?
Okay, so that's a very good question. What I would say to you is that most people think staging is design. So there is a difference between property staging and interior and property design. And I would say that, there's a difference between the type of design that I do and the type of design that a typical interior designer would do, because I'm an investor as well. Yes. In my experience, a lot of interior designers think you've got a blank checkbook, and they'll say, oh, we should move that. I was watching a program the other day and this designer was going, okay, move the window. It's like, anyway, so to answer your question, when you're renting properties, and this comes back to me being a property manager, a rentals manager, and the two big problems with renting property are bad tenants, which can make the whole situation very stressful. So bad customers, I'll call them bad customers, because if you're in business, anyone listening to the podcast, if you're in business, you do get bad customers and they make the whole thing a pain in the backside. And the other issue is that, and we were talking about this just before we went on air, is about wanting to own property for legacy purposes. So, what was my why was I wanted to buy properties that not only gave me an income, but that would also, I've bought 4 houses. My vision, or my long-term strategy, is that in time, if I own them for 20 years, 2 of them can be sold to pay off the other 2. Those other 2 then will be owned outright cash. They'll give me money for when I want to retire. And then I can also hand them to my children totally unencumbered, and they're good properties. In my experience as a letting agent, however, most landlords' properties don't last more than about 5 to 10 years maximum. And then they have to get out. This is a majority of landlords, or they have very poor stock, which means they have bad tenants. So this is the big problem with investing in property. It's not a commodity. It's not like buying gold. This is something that hopefully will bring you in an income on a regular basis, and it will be a legacy. But unfortunately, if you let the properties go, if you let them become, if they degrade over time, they lose value, and you get a worse customer. So longevity is a big part of the design process, big part of the design thinking. Now, that's got nothing to do with cushions, nothing to do with feature walls, and everything to do with thinking about the materials choices and working effectively with contractors. Because a lot of the time, a contractor can give you good advice if you work well with the contractor. And a part of the role of the designer in property is to manage the process as well, is to specify the project, is to have a vision for the project. So it's a very broad brush, really. If you say, I'm a designer, it starts at the very beginning of the process. If you want it to last, that's what I'm saying. If you're a developer, my experience is, if you look at most developments, is after 10 years, most new build developments have real problems with maintenance, problems with I was looking at a development the other day, and I know I'm rambling on, but we're talking about the design and longevity. I was looking at a development in Bradford. I was doing a feasibility study, and this was an urban splash development called Lister Mills. If you Google, this is a lovely development. They won lots of awards, and urban splash are great, but they're developers. They'll do something up and then they sell it. So once it's gone, if they don't, it's nothing to do with them anymore. If you look at the customer feedback of that development now, after 10 years, you're getting complaints about problems with the entry systems. You're getting complaints about the problems with the quality of tenants dropping, and they've got real issues. Another mixed-use development, again, very nice development in Saltaire called Victoria Mills. Horrific problems with maintenance. Part of the development is unsaleable. A lot of the people are in negative equity because it wasn't built to last. So this is a huge problem with property.
Well, there's a few elements there, isn't there? So you've got essentially what you're talking about is people coming in with companies coming in with the intention to maximize the profit up front, flip it on, sell it, make a chunk of cash, go and do it somewhere else again, and repeat the process. So that's a very different type of investor, property developer, than somebody with, investing in a HMO or serviced accommodation where they're buying to hold for the long term, or they're developing for a single let, for example. So, there's a very different thought process to, around even the difference between serviced accommodation, where people are coming for a night and a week, a month, maybe 3 months max. That type of person doesn't need the storage capacity. They don't need the same type of living space as somebody who's living in a HMO, and they're essentially just living out of a bedroom for a lot of the time. So
that's part of a designer's role. Yeah, this is part of a designer's role, is to do a feasibility study, is to look at who you're aiming at, and to design the product according to your customer.
Yes. Well, do you know what? I think most designers would struggle with just those three ideas, because they've never been an investor themselves. They've certainly never lived in a HMO for a lot of them. So if the interior designer might struggle, and you as a developer might struggle because you don't know where to start in design, how can people think better from the beginning? What can people do to make sure that they are future-proofing their projects?
Such a good question. Because I've lived in HMOs and I help run serviced accommodation as a side hustle. I don't do all so most of my job, I would say, is working as a designer. I've lived in HMOs, and quite recently lived in an HMO. Unfortunately, had a divorce. Fortunately, it wasn't a bad divorce, but still, I lived in one of my HMOs for about a year. And what I would say is that it's very difficult to design a product if you've never used the product, or have no passion for customer service. It's very, very difficult. So I would say it's a big mindset issue and a big problem in the industry, because most people say, well, I don't want to be dealing with the client, I want to get a letting agent to do it. And a letting agent, unfortunately, again, most of them have never lived in an HMO. Most of them don't own serviced accommodation, so again, they don't have any idea. But I would say probably, I would say if you're doing serviced accommodation, the best way to design it would probably be to, first of all, get your serviced accommodation finished and then live in it for a week. Because if you live in it for a week, you're going to find, oh, I haven't put anywhere for my coat. The bathroom doesn't have any robe hooks. The bathroom's actually freezing cold. I don't have enough mugs. I've got no cupboard space for my stuff in the kitchen. The lighting's too bright. The flooring's really cold. All these things will become apparent when you start using it. So that's the first thing I'd probably recommend. The second thing is, Google's a great search tool. So you could look for demographics. So, for example, you could Google, what is what age group would typically rent an HMO in my area. I think there are websites where you can find demographics, and do a bit of research on your customer and what their demands are, and certainly look at what the competition is doing, and find out what these kind of customers might want by doing a bit of research. What does a contractor want in a short-term let? You could Google that, or ChatGPT. We were talking about, is it ChatGPT?
Yeah.
So you can use AI to do it nowadays. So you go onto ChatGPT and say, what does the typical contractor look for in a short-term rental property? And bang, AI will search everything on the internet and come up with a few answers for you. So it's actually becoming a lot easier to do these feasibility studies. And once you've got your demographics, then you can go, okay, so I would actually probably recommend that you don't, I've had a lot of, I not say a lot, but I do sometimes come across people that go, okay, so I want to be dealing with, potentially I want to be dealing with contractors, but I may want to deal with holiday makers, and I may actually one day want to turn it into an HMO, and then maybe I might want to turn it into a co-working space. I'm not sure. So can we put all those things into the mix? I'd say that's the wrong thing to do. I would say maybe focus on maybe one of the demographics, and try to work your hardest to put anything in there into your design that you think would help you appeal to that audience.
Yeah.
Staging does have a role in all of this. If you're doing serviced accommodation and if you're doing HMOs, you want to have nice pictures as well. So there is a staging element. But I think demographics, looking at who your customer is, especially in serviced accommodation. I mean, people are just assuming that they're going to be able to do up a service let, put it on the market, and they're going to get rented out, or because their spreadsheet says I have to rent it out for 21 days to make a profit. So the spreadsheet will say I've got to rent it out for 21 days. But, if you've got more and more and more people entering the market space, and the same amount of people in the area looking for serviced accommodation in the area, there's going to be a lot more competition. You're going to get a lot less weeks if you haven't done a lovely design and it's not staged properly. So, design is really important. But yeah, demographics, looking at your customer, what their requirements are.
Well, let's say they go to Google, they research, and they find that the HMOs, for example, their target market is 25 to 35, and these people, they want storage, they want space, they want some comfort, they don't need a TV in their room because they're watching Netflix on their laptop, for example. Can you give us, let's say, 3 ways that how does that turn into the design aspect with the contractor when you're actually building the space out?
Okay, so firstly, I would say that I'll go on my own experience first of all. Okay, so I worked out that my main demographic was going to be people between the ages of about 25 to 40, 25 to 35. And if you look at the kind of style that most 25 to 35 people like. It tends to be the mid-century modern type style, IKEA types. IKEA is very mid-century modern. This is the style that they all tend to prefer the most. And so I looked at that style first of all. Second thing is that I realized that, again, longevity is really important as well. So I had to look at materials. So in terms of working with contractors, the first thing you need to do is have a vision for what you're going to be doing. So rather than letting the contractor specify the project, which is the most horrific thing you could possibly do, this is not having a go at contractors. It's just, a contractor is not a designer. A contractor, you tell a contractor what you want and they do it. They're not going to think, oh, they might want some nice lights, so we'll put in some nice lights, or they're going to want this bathroom to last 20 years, so I'm going to design it to last 20 years. That's not what the contractor is going to do. They're going to assume, being that you're an investor, is that you want it done cheap. The other thing they're going to probably assume is that tenants, every time I've spoken to contractors about tenants, they say, they're only tenants, why are you making the effort?
And they're going to trash it anyway.
This is the attitude of a contractor. In fact, when a contractor said that to me, I had a contractor turn around to me and he said, "Just have to tell you this quick story because it was just amazing. It just summed it all up." He was walking around my house going, "I'd love to have a rental property, but I'd never have a rental property near where I live." I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "Well, I don't want to bump into any of my tenants in the pub." I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "Well, if I had any problems." I said, "Well, what if you bumped into me in the pub?" He said, "Oh, that's different. You're my customer." And I said, "Well, the people moving into this house are my customers." So then he got it. But I think what's important is if you were to Google what are the traits of an effective boss, and I would recommend anybody who listens to this podcast who thinks they're going to be buying a property and doing a refurb, you are going to be a boss. So it's very simple. Google what are the traits of an effective boss, and there are a few things that will come up. One of them will be honesty. So another one will be provide the correct materials. Another one is make working fun and be supportive.
There are lots of hats to wear when you're investing, when you're starting out. One of them is understanding the numbers in property, understanding how property legislation works, if you're going to manage yourself, etc. And it seems like it's later on down the journey that people realize they need a hat of how to design the property correctly. And then once they understand that, how to work with contractors so that they are, achieving the right product the first time, rather than creating something and then having to go back retrospectively and change things. So when somebody's working with a contractor, how do they can you give us like a couple of tips? And I know one, for example, that you talk about looking at the floor plan, the layout, from the beginning, and mapping out like the electrical floor plan, where things are going to go in the room, and making sure that it's a very livable space for the customer.
Yeah, first of all, I want to just say something, pick up on something you just said, is that the deal's got to stack up. Okay, the numbers have to stack up. The problem is the numbers won't stack up if you don't create a good product. The numbers aren't going to stack up if your product only lasts 5 years. You can't just assume that the numbers are going to work if you don't know anything about the product you're creating. That's just spreadsheet stuff. This is the issue. As you came to me looking for some help on your own HMOs because you needed to up your game on the design because the numbers weren't stacking up as much as they could be. So the first thing I would say is that if you're working out the numbers won't stack up if you don't create a good product. If it only lasts you 5 years and you've got to do a refurb again, then those numbers aren't real. They're not real numbers. So that I have to say that. Then now we're talking about the practical side of things, and I always refer back to these 10 principles of good design that were created They weren't created, but they were discovered and penned by a guy called Dieter Rams, who's one of probably the most influential consumer product designers that's ever lived. In fact, he inspired a lot of Apple products, and IKEA certainly copy a lot of his designs as well. So he's probably the most influential product designer that's ever lived, and he created these 10 principles. And one of the main ones that I tend to find is most relevant to certainly HMOs is good design has to perform its function. Good design is useful design. So when you look at a product, you have to think, okay, how's this product supposed to function? So if we take a bedroom, for example, now an HMO bedroom has to function very differently to a serviced accommodation bedroom. Serviced accommodation bedroom has to be very easy to clean and turn around. That's one of the design priorities for a serviced accommodation bedroom. So you design it in that way. With an HMO bedroom, in the main, you're dealing with somebody that is probably going to spend most of their free time when they're not outside in that bedroom, which means that it has to serve many functions. So one of them is it should be comfortable. It should be comfortable. Another one is, okay, so we're now talking about layout drawing. So when we talk about comfort is not only a comfortable bed, but I don't know about you, but I don't like to have one light fitting in the middle of the room, bright lights, and a lot of contractors love to put in inset spots all over the place. You know, if I was going to bed and I wanted to just watch a movie or just read a book, I don't want to have a ton of inset spotlights beaming down on me. I'd like to have some ambient lighting. And so lighting is a very big part of the design. Another thing is, you know, it's very easy to just create an average product, but I like to think about, okay, how can I make this product better so that someone's going to stay in it long term? So I think about things, very little tiny details, but design is all about the detail. So things like positioning of plug sockets and, you know, really quite funky lighting to make it more attractive. These have to be put in on the drawings at the earlier stages, because again, the worst thing in the world for a contractor is for a client to walk in and go, oh, I totally forgot. I want some plug sockets there, and there, and there. And the problem for the contractor is that it's not easy to get an electrician to come back to a job. And sometimes it might hold everything up, and holding things up costs them money. And so for me, a very big part of the design, and certainly a major part of the thinking, is done when you look at a layout drawing. I do an exercise with my students where we look at a kitchen design done by a company called HMO. Can't remember the name of the company, but something like HMO Experts. Okay. And their kitchen design featured a fridge in front of the window and about that much counter space to actually do your, you know, prepare food. And it was a 4-bed HMO, and there was one storage cupboard for 4 people in this kitchen. And when I spoke to the client, I pointed out, and she said, well, it won't work. The numbers won't work if we can't. If I have to turn a bedroom into a living room, the numbers won't work. So this kitchen has to perform the function of a living room and a kitchen, but it was very small. And so I spent a lot of time redesigning that kitchen on the drawings to make it as functional as I could, to put as much storage in it as I could, and to create a space where the tenants could relax, watch TV. There wasn't enough room for a sofa, but certainly there was enough room for them to relax, and we can make it look nice. But this is, again, a problem that I come up with quite a lot from people that really probably have never lived in an HMO. They're just looking at the numbers and they're going, okay, I've got to put a bedroom there. So the kitchen's going to be, but imagine a kitchen with maybe 6 people in a 6-bed HMO, and you've got this tiny little sofa space, and you've got a big rubbish bin, you've got a recycle bin, and you don't have enough storage space, you don't have enough worktop space, and this is the communal space for all your tenants. How long is it going to last before the whole place turns into a total mess? And then you have a higher turnover of tenants. So this can only be really dealt with right at the beginning when you're looking at the layout drawings. And architects won't do it. And, you know, certainly project managers won't do it. Sourcing agents won't do it. The only person that can do it is really the person that's really thinking about the customer and thinking about the longevity of the product.
Yeah. Do you see examples of your students, people who've gone through your training, they've not just made the place look better, but they've made it more functional. What benefits have they seen?
So I'll give you an example: the property doctors, or City One Development, City One, who I've worked with. A couple of names elude me, but these people have won awards for best HMO. They're actually doing training and getting a lot of credibility from what they've done. You're seeing a lot of my trainees' properties, and they're being featured in YPN magazine. Yeah. So the only kind of main results that I see over a period of time are the professional property, let's call them property people, because I wouldn't call them investors, because it's a business. It's not if it was investing, they wouldn't be on Facebook. If it was investing, they'd be in the Bahamas. So these are property business people. They've got property businesses.
Okay.
What's that worth? If you've got a product that has allowed you to raise your profile, that's given you great credibility, what price do you put on that?
There are many benefits to having done things right the first time. As you said there, you not only got that credibility, but when you're going to investors, landlords, or agents, you can feel proud of not just the product, but the home that you're providing for your customers.
This is the thing, is that if you're mentoring people, if you're winning awards for best product and it's giving you credibility, then you've got another stream of income. So it's not all down to design. Design is a factor, but it does give you great credibility. So that's one side of it. But on the other side of it, is a landlord side of it, is peace of mind. Having good customers means that your business is a pleasure to do. If you've got bad customers, your business, and in fact, who is it? I've forgotten his name. He's a marketing guy. I've forgotten his name, but he talks about elf business and half businesses. Half business is hard, annoying, labor intensive, and frustrating. And elf is easy, lucrative, and fun. Okay, so I would say that a well-designed product, and I'm not talking about just nice cushions and staging. I'm talking about something that's going to keep your customers happy for a long period of time, keep people loyal, means that you have an easy, lucrative, and fun business, which also means that your return on investment. Again, if you only have to spend, let's say, 4 weeks in a year managing your portfolio, or the other side of the coin, every week you've got a problem to deal with and it's taking your time, then you could be making a higher ROI. But if your time is taken up dealing with aggravation all the time, then I'd rather have a slightly lower income, but only have to spend a week every 3 months dealing with my happy, nice customers. So again, design is not just what you see, it's how easy it is to run, how fun it is to deal with your customers, how all of these things together. So I would say that you can't quantify all of this stuff. The way I quantify it is peace of mind. The way I quantify it is minimal amount of maintenance. The way I quantify it is actually enjoying dealing with my customers rather than every time they call thinking I've got a problem. All of these things are part of the benefits.
So there's lots of intangible benefits like peace of mind, having the longevity, and having great customers, having that feeling of being proud of your property, etc. But let's say a typical consultation with yourself, a couple £100. You help somebody redesign their property either from scratch or an existing property. Not only are they able to then increase their rents, then potentially the valuation of the property goes up as well. So how do you see that initial investment of that consultation, plus let's say they've got to go out and actually buy extra things that they wouldn't have normally bought?
Okay, let's look at what's in YPN magazine this month, because I'm featured in it, so I can blow my own trumpet. But let's look at Shimon's project. Okay, this is on a bigger scale, but it happens on a smaller scale. Okay, to me, and I've dealt with investors where they've gone, I've got an existing portfolio. Should I take money out and buy something new, or should I reinvest in my existing portfolio, make it better, and attract better customers? When I've dealt with people who have reinvested in their existing portfolio and upgraded it, up-specified it, they found that it's a much higher return on investment than if they would have spent the money on a new property and left their other projects to get older and older and older. So I would say, first of all, the evidence that I've got back from existing landlords is when they've reinvested in their existing portfolio and improved their customers, the money they spent on doing the upgrade had a higher return than if they'd have spent the money buying another property.
Right. Okay.
So that's the first thing. Let's look at Shimon. It's a commercial to residential project where it was turning an old nightclub into 16 serviced accommodation holiday apartments. The Rick's surveyor, and I had another conversation with the developer today, but Rick's surveyor originally valued it at 1.2 million before it was completed. That was their estimated valuation. And so Shimon came to me, because he knows I've done design work, and he said, Julian, I want you to make them really attractive, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's go all the way to when it was finished. The Rick's valuation came in and it was valued at 1.53 million.
Wow.
So that was, it was around about 320 odd thousand pounds gross increase. After stamp duty, fees, agents' fees, it was an increase of £250,000, which was an increase of £12,000 per unit.
Wow.
And it didn't cost anywhere near that in spend to increase that valuation. I would say it probably cost an extra maximum £2,000 maximum. That's on labor and materials, because there was some, nicer light switches, better paint scheme, things were laid out correctly. He had to pay me, and so I would say that he made £10,000 profit on a £2,000 spend. So what's that ROI? That's how many hundreds of percent is that? So I would say that the money that you spend on design, if you do it right, is probably the highest ROI on any of the money, because you're going to spend an amount on the property anyway. And so we're talking about a small bit extra to increase its curb appeal. That little bit extra that you spend has the highest ROI of all of the money that you're going to spend, because it gets you a higher valuation, higher rent, better customers, longer tenancies, better reputation, all of these things. So that money is the best ROI you can spend. And let's just talk about color. Okay, the correct use of color increases brand recognition by about 90%. The correct use of color makes a product more attractive to the consumer. If it's advertised online, it makes it 85% more attractive if you use color properly. So again, using color is probably, spending money on a little bit on design gives you a great ROI. And if you started getting good with color and started using visual merchandising and adding a little bit of color into the mix, the extra money you spend on paint to make it colorful and a few bit of colorful accessories, again, the ROI on that is probably thousands of percent.
Yeah, especially if you take it over the long term. And we had a consultation last year now, and I came to you and I had a HMO, still got it. It was a 7-bed HMO, and the rooms are fantastic sizes. It's our best property by far in terms of the layout, the rooms, the location, etc. So we've never had any difficulty filling it at the rents that we want, which have always been top of the market. And what we noticed recently was that they just weren't going as quickly. So once people moved out, we could achieve those rents, but it would mean, let's say, 6, 7 or 8 viewings to get the right person to get who would pay that amount. And after our consultation, we spent, I would say, probably about £400 on decorating the room, making sure that it looked the part. And now we've been able to increase the rent on the room by £100.
So what's the ROI on that then? If you take that over a period of time, it's phenomenal. This is my point, and it's not your skill at negotiating a deal.
No,
it's the design, which is why I always believe that design is an integral part of the success of getting into property. I really am reluctant to call it investing in property, because that suggests that you're just buying something and leaving it, whereas actually, and we were again talking about this, is that I would say I'm in business. My life, most of my life, I've been working for myself, and I've had customers, and I have the same philosophy with my property business as I do with my design business. I have customers. If I do a good job, they'll come back, they'll stay, they'll be loyal. So it's the same thing. But if we're talking about profits, my own experience with this is that my properties have been built to last. So I'm not really the most trendy designer out there.
right.
But because I kind of look at, how has this got to be done?
How has it got to be done? Go on,
Well, okay. Well, look.
What?
Okay. There are two priorities when you're dealing with. Let's take HMOs. Okay. Now there are people out there that are saying it has to be a boutique hotel standard. Okay. Which, to me, if you look at the demographics, they're not. Let's take the Pulitzer Hotel in Amsterdam, which is a prize-winning boutique hotel, and there are some HMOs out there that I would say you look at them and it's done to that standard. Okay, so who are the typical guests that stay at the Pulitzer Hotel? Are you trying to appeal to them? No, that's not the customer. I would say it's a vanity project in a lot of cases. In reality, there are two big priorities when you're dealing with HMOs. One is you've got to appeal to the right customer, which I would say 25 to 35, they're looking for value. They're not looking to spend a fortune now. Okay, they're also so it has to do everything that these customers want. The other side of the coin, it's got to last decades.
What do you do differently to make the product last? Okay,
what do I do differently? I put in fitted furniture.
Okay.
Built-in furniture. So I design the furniture and it's all built in, and it's made of, I've got my brochures up here. It's made of very, very solid materials. You can climb on it. Even the choice of materials, not just the strength of them, but the colors or the type of materials are chosen to last. So I'll give you an example, very quick one. The IKEA Malm chest of drawers. How long have IKEA been making the Malm chest of drawers for? And what's the color range that they've been making for the longest?
I've only ever seen them in white.
Okay, white. Okay, that's one clever one, because I've used white, but oak and white. Right. Oak and white. So I've used a very similar kind of my fitted furniture is designed very similar to IKEA's designs, because IKEA products appeal to millennials. Millennials are my main customers. Also, I've looked at their ranges that seem to be the most durable and long lasting. So if they made a piece of furniture that was actually designed in the 1950s, and they're still making it today, and they'll still be making it in 50 years time, then I'm going to be following that kind of style. I'm going to be looking at those kind of materials, etc. So that my furniture is bomb proof. Paints, I specify durable paints. I don't start putting paneling on walls I'm going to have to replace in 10 years time, because it's not fashionable anymore. So I keep the design fairly simple. That's the thing I do. I don't put in en suites. Now, a lot of people talk about, it's got to have an ensuite for it to get a higher price. I've done the numbers so many times. Okay, if you've got a 6-bed HMO, which is all en suites, you're probably going to have to start replacing or maintaining those en suites. After about 10 years, you are going to have a massive maintenance bill. Whereas I would probably have 2 bathrooms between 6. That's 1 bathroom between 3. So I would have my build cost would be lower. I'd spend the money on more durable materials. But an ensuite doesn't actually make any more profit than a shared bathroom over a 10-year period.
Right, because you've got the maintenance.
Because you've got the maintenance and the initial cost. Also, an ensuite bathroom will probably only look really good for about 3 years before mold starts appearing, because you can't actually maintain an ensuite bathroom in an HMO.
Yeah,
you can't.
that's true.
So it's going to degrade. Once it starts degrading, then it loses its value. The other thing that happens is if you spent all your money on en-suites, then you can't actually spend the money on the really important stuff like comfort, storage, good quality carpets, good quality blinds, good quality paints. So everything starts to degrade faster. So I would say the biggest advice I can give in terms of design with HMOs is keep the design simple. Don't overcomplicate the design. And if you think that en suites are the way to go, I would do the numbers really carefully, because at the moment I'm getting a higher price for my non-ensuite double rooms than my competitors are for their ensuite rooms, because their ensuite rooms that they did 4 years ago are looking like crap, and the kitchens aren't big enough because they did the numbers on their spreadsheet and they and they don't have enough storage, so the tenants aren't staying. I get a lot of tenants who say, I was living in an 8-bed, but there was a bad tenant in there, or it just didn't feel homely, or I just had a problem with another tenant, or the gardens were looking crap, or the maintenance wasn't being looked after. So, keep the design as simple as possible. You don't have to create a boutique hotel in that market. You're not appealing to that kind of customer demographic, and you have to think about longevity in the design.
Yeah.
So that's the advice I would give. I mean, you asked me huge questions, but what I did was I tried to make it look as good as possible. I used durable materials. I looked at my customer demographic and said, look, there's an appropriate level of spend, and what I can save on not having to make it look like a boutique, and I can use more durable materials, then that's what I'm going to do.
Great. Well, lots and lots of tips there for people listening, I'm sure. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. Before we go, I know that you are about to launch a new training program, and it's alongside YPN as well. So do you want to just tell us a bit more about that, how it can benefit people who don't know where to start, people who have the right intentions, they want to do this well, but they don't have a contractor who understands design, and they don't have an interior designer who's got an investor hat on, who has dealt with in HMOs or serviced accommodation before. So how can your training help people?
The only thing I can do is tell you my why.
Okay.
On this one is that I started doing, I spend most of my time working for clients doing design work. So this is not my main business. It's something that I do as a passion project, first of all, and actually working with YPN now has taken it a little bit further than being a passion project. But the reason why I started doing it was because, and we were talking about this earlier, and I'm not criticizing property gurus, but because I've had quite a lot of experience, I was seeing people selling courses that didn't include looking at design, looking at project management. And to me, it is, if you have that missing, you can't make a success of property. It's not going to work. And I just felt that somebody has to talk about this stuff. Yeah. And so you asked me to look at, what are the benefits, and I've got a very long track record of people who, number one, have gone on to be very successful in property, or number two, have come back to me and said, I've broken the rental ceiling, I'm doing really well at this, I'm doing serviced accommodation, and while all my customers are struggling to rent weeks out, I'm getting bookings way in advance from all over the world. So I've got a whole load of testimonials from customers saying, this has been the best training I've ever done, because I can create a great product. So I can just tell you is that my why for doing this is because I believe that if you don't understand, number one, how to deal with contractors, you're going to go over budget. That can ruin the whole thing, because if you've gone over budget, you're going to compromise. And if you compromise on your product, you are going to lose value, quite a lot of value. And long-term, bad customers, higher churn rate. So that's just dealing with contractors. And then on the design side, if you're doing your numbers, and especially today, because, look, property is now, I think, regressing back to probably what it was a few years back, where, this is probably the safest place to invest money. Stock market, no. Crypto, no. If you're getting into property long term and you've got some money to invest and you want to secure it into property, then if you design it right from the start, you understand how you're working with contractors, you build good relationships with people, you have good customers, then you will achieve what you want to achieve. So that was my why. I do think it's, there's obviously you've got to understand how to do the numbers. Obviously, you've got to understand how to deal with agents. Obviously, you've got to, if you're wanting to raise finance, how to do that, etc., etc., etc. But without this element, it's not going to produce the numbers that are on your spreadsheet. So this is why I'm doing it, is because it makes it an ELF business, not a half business.
And remind us what the ELF stands for.
ELF, easy, lucrative, and fun.
Great.
Half is hard, annoying, labor intensive, and frustrating. So without the design, that's what it is. And I guarantee if you go onto Facebook and you hear all the landlords complaining about bad tenants, evictions, problems, if you look at their product, it's a rubbish product. All those people that are saying, we haven't got any problems, we're upping our rents, we're able to get good customers, we're now doing webinar training with people, we've got a great reputation. I guarantee you it's because they have a good product.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And obviously at YPN we're really pleased to be working with you, because we also see that gap in the market. So many people who just they've invested, and then a couple of years later, they're stuck in this place where they can't go back and change the product. They don't know how to move forward, and nobody else is really talking about design from this aspect of work from the beginning, setting out what your intentions are for the customer to have a great living space, a great staying space, and starting with the end in mind, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Really exciting project. We will be putting the links in the show notes for anyone who wants to find out more about the training. And I know that we have limited spaces. I think we're taking on 30 per quarter.
Yeah, so. I'm crapping myself because it's only me, and and when I work with people, I do tend to take things very personally. So I want to provide an excellent training experience. So yeah, there can only be a limited number of people because it's only me and I've got other jobs to do. So yeah, but I'll tell you, it's an absolute honor to be doing this, and it's really my goal is to really get this to be quite a mainstream thing, especially in property training, because I do think it's missing. I do think it's missing. So it'll be great to have people on board.
Absolutely, really exciting. Well, that's it for now. So we look forward to seeing you all next time on the podcast. And Julian, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Lots of golden nuggets there, lots of great advice for people.
Thank you.
So look forward to seeing you next. Thank you. And for anyone who is not yet a subscriber to the magazine, please click the link in the show notes for your free 30-day trial.